Hi, this is John Pettigrew, and you're listening to Talking Through My Hat, a podcast that explores bookish businesses, the fantastic people who create them, and what those people have learned. I'm a hat wearer, a recovering editor, and the creator of Futureproofs, enabling editors and authors to work better online. To find out more, visit wearefutureproofs.com or follow me on Twitter at John_Pettigrew. Welcome back to this week's episode. Before we get stuck into the interview itself, I did want to record a quick apology for the sound quality at the beginning of this. Unfortunately, the window cleaner was visiting. There's some odd thumping noise you'll hear, but it only lasted the first couple of minutes. My microphone at this end also seems to have developed a bit of a hiss towards the end, so again, apologies for that. Hopefully, that won't detract from what was an absolutely fascinating discussion with Nancy. Welcome to another episode of Talking Through My Hat. Today I'm talking with Nancy Roberts, founder and CEO of the social enterprise Business Inclusivity, and most recently of Umbrella Analytics, providing data-driven insights to help businesses take action to improve diversity and inclusion. Before all that, she spent many years working in publishing, including a long stint at Cambridge University Press, ending as Global Operations Director for the academic group. So welcome to Talking Through My Hat, Nancy.
Thanks for having me.
The question I always like to start with is how you describe your business, and I guess especially here, how business inclusivity and Umbrella kind of inform each other.
Yeah, so Business Inclusivity is a consultancy business where I work with primarily with publishers on issues of diversity and inclusion. So that might be helping them to put together a recruitment strategy to recruit more diversely, or it might be looking at things like their gender pay data and helping them to understand how they might take action on that.
Yep.
So that's very much a kind of one-on-one consultancy basis. Umbrella really came out of that because it came out of partly a need from those customers who are saying, you know, we want better analytics around this. We want to know how we're doing. We want to know, can we see measurable improvements? We also want to know, are we doing better or worse than our competitors? What are the kind of specific nuances of our sector?
And
Yeah, exactly. All of that. And that's quite hard, actually. It's quite hard to get that data. It's quite hard to see it. And a lot of the data that's out there is very high level, which makes it kind of meaningless as a comparison, you know, comparing Elsevier with, I don't know, Penguin. Yes, there's some parallels there, but actually, is that a meaningful comparison? Perhaps not. So
and it's all that stuff like, you know, the recently published stuff, everyone focused on the average, which is a good start. But, you know, then you think, well, but actually the quartile data is even more interesting. And the deeper you get into this stuff, the more interesting it gets.
Exactly. And then, you know, you can start thinking, well, what would be a really interesting comparison? So, for example, if you're the Institute of Physics Publishing, perhaps it's more interesting to look at the physics academic sector as a comparison and see how you do against that. So, you know, it's finding different ways to kind of get under that data and help companies to think about where they've really got issues and where perhaps the data is saying a certain thing, but that's a reality of the kind of business that they're in. So I wanted to do something which could answer that need, but also could be more scalable. So I could, you know, help businesses have better access to that data and be able to use it themselves, as well as, you know, calling in me to do kind of manual data analysis. So the two businesses inform each other, I guess. And, you know, ultimately, obviously, if people are doing the data analysis and then they think they'd like some consultancy, then that's on offer, or they may just choose to look at the data and work that way with Umbrella. So that's how they fit together. So with the Umbrella, I mean, I'm really fascinated by this because obviously until very recently, the main problem has been that the data simply hasn't been available. No one used to talk about it, but about, you know, the different pay gaps between different demographic groups. And we now got this really good gender pay gap information that came out. I mean, do you find that you're helping customers gather their own data better, gather new data, or is it more about analysing the data they already have in the public data, or a kind of a mixture of the two? It's a mixture of the two. When I started out, I think I was interested in helping them with the analytics side because often the people who are collecting this data, they're in the HR department. They've got lots of other pressures. They haven't necessarily got the time and skills to kind of sit down and really get into the data science. So it started from there. But actually, you're right that collecting the data is a bit of a challenge as well. And I think that a lot of employers are quite nervous about asking people to self-identify in surveys or whatever, you know, to identify perhaps if they have a disability or their religious background or whatever. They're kind of worried that might might be traceable back to them. So what I'm working on now is, can I become a kind of trusted, neutral, anonymous data collector that can help with some of those issues? So by bringing in a third party who's not part of the employment establishment, I don't know any of the people. I wouldn't be able to trace back people's answers by their department or anything like that. So I can take that data anonymously, work with it.
So kind of an insulation layer kind of between their bureaucracy and their data.
Exactly, yeah, and the hope is that will then encourage more people to participate in those kind of surveys, and we'll get better and richer information because they feel less nervous about being honest about some of their challenges and their background and that kind of thing. So I think ultimately over time it will be a mix of both, sort of helping to collect the data but also then helping to kind of understand it and see what it's really telling you.
So you kind of got a complementary set. You started with the consult. I mean, it's kind of a classic startup journey. This you've started as a consultancy, and then you're moving into being kind of, I guess, from the sound of it, ultimately kind of a tech platform that people can do their own stuff with.
Yeah.
So I think we'll dig into that a little bit later. But what I wanted to get into, kind of as well, as we said, you had a safe corporate job, and then you went and you did this mad, I'm going to do my own business thing. Why did you start out as yourself for your own business?
I guess it's a really good question. I think I'd spent sort of 20 years in publishing, I guess. I'd done lots of interesting things, had lots of interesting roles. And I reached the point where I wasn't quite sure where I would go next. I couldn't see what was next for me. I couldn't really see a business that I wanted to work for. I couldn't really identify the next step. Yeah. And that sort of got me thinking, well, I need to then rethink a little bit and, take a bit of time out. So I decided that I wanted to do an MBA, which was partly to kind of help with that thinking. What am I really interested in? Where do I want to go next? Yeah. Are my kind of skills and interests transferable? All of those kind of things. And then through the course of that, I guess, on an MBA, you get a lot of kind of feedback and a lot of interaction with people from lots of different sectors. And people started saying to me, well, you're really passionate about diversity, about inclusion, but you also really care about publishing. And, you can see that there's a problem there. Is there somewhere that you can be in that kind of connection between your two interests that could be useful? So it kind of came out of that, really. It wasn't like a planned career move, but it sort of evolved, I guess, from the various sort of conversations I was having with myself about where I go next and what I want to do next. So
putting together two different passions, two different interests to make a new thing, a fusion that is yours.
Yeah, and I think, when I reflect back on sort of leaving publishing, I think one of the reasons I couldn't identify a role that I wanted to go to was because of these issues around diversity and inclusion. It felt to me like every role I looked at had the same kind of challenges in the sense of being very homogenous, often the boards being, very similar sorts of people from very similar backgrounds. Yeah. And, a lot of the discussions that were going on in publishing a couple of years ago, and still are to some extent, were around how do we innovate more? How do we get new ideas? How do we, challenge other sources of kind of education and entertainment and information? And one of my concerns was, you would get sort of 10 people who all looked identical and went to the same university and have the same social background sitting around talking about how to innovate. Well,
why can't we get any different ideas? Because you're all the same.
Because you're all the same. Look at you guys. So I think it was partly that as well. It was sort of we need to think differently, and we need to understand the industry in a different way if we're going to really kind of progress it in the way that you look at, Netflix and streaming and things like that. They just take a very, very different view of the world than publishing. And I think we need a bit of that. So I guess it was a way of saying we've got a challenge here, but if we can address that diversity challenge, it will help with all of our other challenges. It's not just diversity for diversity's sake. It's actually going to help us as an industry to move forward. So that's my kind of hope, I guess.
But as you say, there are lots of forms of diversity which publishing is very bad, and one of them is socioeconomic class. And I say part of it is that thing that we've almost all jobs in publishing start with that must have a degree. Yeah. And you think, really?
Yeah.
I mean, is that one of the things that you kind of talk to people about? It's not just here's where you are, but when you say, well, what do you do about it? How do you fix this? If you think it's a problem, what do you do to resolve it?
Yeah, exactly. So, we all know that everyone's very busy, and if you're recruiting for a role, you take the job ad that you did 2 years ago, and you update a few things and you stick it back out, which means it perpetuates some of these things like must have a degree. If you actually sit and think about it, I mean, I always worked in production. I'm not convinced that you need a degree to work in production. You need skills. You definitely need skills and experience, but they're different kinds of skills and experience that you could get from working in operations in any other industry or sector. And that, to me, would be more valuable than having a degree in that particular sphere. That's not to say that, there aren't specialist subject matter roles where a degree is required, but I think there's a kind of, I guess, a passivity about the way that we've recruited, where we just say, yes, you must have a degree, you must be this kind of person, without actually interrogating, is that really what we need for this role? Or is that just something we've always put in our job ads and therefore it stays there? And the way I think of it is, diversity is kind of a fact. It's a numbers game to a degree, but it's inclusion that requires a sort of positive choice, and that's where the culture change comes in. So I've seen a lot of organisations rolling out unconscious bias training. Now, I'm not knocking that. It's a good baseline for everybody to have that and to start to interrogate those biases. But the real question comes in, where does the culture change come around that? Are you actually changing people's thinking? Are you putting in active kind of measures to make sure that those biases don't perpetuate? Because it's all very well as being aware of our biases, but are we therefore changing them? So I like to sort of think about, well, okay, how do you then make sure that those biases are not playing out in your recruitment decisions? So that might be you need to have 2 or 3 people interrogate your choice of recruitment. Is this the best person for the job, or is it the person who's most like you? And is that why you're favouring them over someone with the same skills but maybe a different background? So, I'm not knocking unconscious bias training. I think it's a useful thing, but I think
it's kind of a starting point, not an end point.
It's a baseline. Basically, it gets everyone to the same level of thinking about it.
There are certain things you have to do simply to get through the gate that there's no excuse for companies not doing, but that's not really the meat of it, is it?
Yeah, it's not. It's the start, as you say, and then it's about how do you make those active steps to change the culture.
Yeah. So what kind of things do you find yourself talking to people about to do that cultural shift? Because it's not, as I say, it's not just recruitment is the first step. Again, you've got to get people in, but then will they stay? How do you promote them? All those kinds of things.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's, there's a mix of things. I think it's important to get people in. It's also important to get people to think about what the kind of environment that they're entering into. So I actually do quite a lot of work with sort of groups of entry-level people who want to be kind of allies and who want to change the culture. And that's very interesting because they're thinking very much not in a top-down way. They're thinking, what can I do in my team, in my environment that would be more inclusive? And I get some really interesting ideas out of that, how people can, how there's a tendency, for example, to organise going out for drinks when someone new starts. And of course, there's a question there about how appropriate that is for everybody. And, does that exclude certain people who don't want to go to the pub but might enjoy going out for dinner or going to the theatre or whatever? So I think there's things like that on the kind of ground level about how you include someone. And I think also simple things really like the onboarding process. It can be very intimidating coming into an environment where everybody knows the rules. And this is true for anyone. This isn't particularly a diversity issue, but I think it plays out more in those areas where you're perhaps the only person in your team from a certain socioeconomic background or whatever. You feel less inclined to speak up and say, I don't really understand what that means, or, I find this meeting a bit scary. How do I prepare for it? So things like looking at how can you have like buddying schemes that are actually tackling those issues, that give someone a safe space where they can say, I don't know how to handle this meeting. I don't know if I'm supposed to speak or not. I don't know how to prepare for it. Or, going further up the pipeline, it might be around how are you encouraging more people into senior roles? And one of my great beefs is around mentorship programs. Not because I don't think they can be very useful on a personal level, but they don't actually deliver much change. And the reason for that, I think, is that mentoring kind of puts the onus back on the individual. It's like, you need some mentoring to get to that next stage because, we've identified you as someone who might progress, but you've got these challenges. Well, that's fine, and we can all improve. But actually, the research suggests it's the reason many more men get through the pipeline is because they have champions. They don't have mentors. So they have someone in the boardroom going, Steve would be great for this project. He's really got this and that skill, or we should definitely consider Dave for this promotion. And it's that moves the dial.
Yeah, men are much more likely to get promoted for potential.
Yeah.
He will do well in this role, even if he doesn't have the skills now. Whereas she has to have everything before we'll promote her, kind of stuff.
Exactly. So we need to mentor her and fix all the gaps that she's got, and then we'll, put her forward for the roles. And that to me is a real challenge, and we need to think differently about how we approach that. How do we get people championing women in those environments and saying, maybe Sarah's got 80% of these skills, but I think she'd be brilliant, rather than let's give her a mentor and give her 100% of the skills and take another 5 years to get her ready for that role. Yeah. So there's lots of things up and down the organisation that businesses can do differently.
So with the umbrella, as you think about as your business, also it's Business Inclusivity is a year and a half old or something, and Umbrella's quite new. When you plan ahead for those businesses, when you think, okay, where do I want to be in a few years? I mean, obviously you have some sort of plan, but how do you put that together? Do you have particular goals that you're trying to achieve, or are you kind of more reacting to the environment a lot still because it's all changing?
It does change very fast. I think with Business Inclusivity, my view was always that the measure of success for that business will be when it's not needed anymore, which is kind of always how I've approached my career, I think. My job is to almost put myself out of a job. It's to make this team run so well that they don't need a manager anymore, or to make this division so successful they don't need, they don't need me telling them what to do anymore. And I think I feel the same about Business Inclusivity. I'd really like to get to a point where nobody needs to bring in consultants to help them think about these issues, where it's just part of the DNA of business. Umbrella is a different thing, I think, because there will always be a need to kind of have those measures, and it's always going to be important to hold businesses to account, particularly around things like gender pay, and I would expect very soon there'll be a lot more discussion around ethnicity pay gaps as well.
Yeah, and there's always a tendency to other. I think getting away from that human tendency is going to be, there's always going to be a group somewhere.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that the data is a really important part of holding people to account in that sense. I guess with Umbrella is much more of a kind of traditional startup mode, in that, I want to scale up quickly. I want to get to the point in, 5 years' time where it's a very accessible online software as a service solution, at which point, who knows, I either sell it or I take over the world, or...
Well, we can always hope, can't we? Yes.
Yeah, we can always dream. But yeah, I think if Business Inclusivity isn't needed 5 years from now, that will make me pretty happy, actually, and I'll find something else. I'll find another problem to solve.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. As you say, it's this thing of growing a startup. You start with consultancy and then you turn it into something that's scalable, that's a tool for other people to do, to embed your knowledge in it, I think is the thing, isn't it? So if they've got that data, then they don't need you, because they can do it themselves, provided they know to look at it. Yeah,
exactly. And they have the right kind of expertise helping them through that process of understanding that data, which again is what ultimately Umbrella will do. We'll build those kind of logics into it so that people can look at their data in different ways and receive the right kind of advice about it. So that's the goal for that. And then we'll see.
That's it. So to turn to kind of focus a little bit on you for a bit, what is it that we've been talking about all the stuff that you're doing and all these difficult questions and challenges you're kind of trying to help businesses tackle. What is it that you find hardest about running your businesses?
I think, there are various things. I think, as you will know, if you're running your own business, one of the problems is priorities, because there's always a million things you could do every day, and, a million kind of opportunities to market and opportunities to get in front of people, and you have to be very focused about that, and it means sometimes you've got to turn stuff down, which is really hard when you're starting out. So I think that's always tough, and I think being really clear about where you're trying to get to is the only way I've found to be helpful with that. To say, in a year from now I want to be at this stage, is this particular task helping me on that journey, or is it just something I'm interested in and I'd quite like to do it, so that's one thing. I think it can be quite lonely, obviously, because you don't have a team around you that you're kind of able to bounce ideas off. And I'm very much a kind of ideas person, but I quite like having the kind of critical voices, because I can have a lot of ideas of which, 90% might be completely crazy. And I need someone...
Yeah, you need someone to help you prove.
Yeah, exactly. And someone to go, okay, calm down now. We've got an idea here that we can work with. Yeah. We don't need any more for the moment. So I find that a challenge. And I'm lucky that I have some MBA colleagues who are, always willing to listen and sort of help me with that. But that is a challenge. And I think, it's an obvious thing to say from the perspective of my businesses, but being a woman in that environment can be quite tough. Quite often, particularly in tech environments, there are not many women in the room. It is a very macho culture often. It's a very young culture, and I'm not the youngest entrepreneur in town. So that I think there are personal challenges around that, or things I find difficult. And, I take the view of part of what I'm here to do is challenge those kind of spaces. But that doesn't mean that it's always easy to do that. And sometimes it takes a bit of just kind of girding your loins and throwing yourself into a situation, which can be a bit draining at times.
Absolutely.
But again, I have a huge network of people who are very supportive and who understand that experience and always ready to kind of support that. So
yeah,
it's all good.
So what have you learned about yourself from all of this process? Are you still, do you still see yourself the same way you did 2 years ago, or have you teased out some new things?
I think I have much more confidence in my skills more generally. I think part of the problem of being in publishing for so long is you start to wonder if you can do anything else. And it is a bit of a funny industry in many ways. It's slightly different. It's not necessarily as profit driven as other corporate cultures. There are different things at play. And I think it's been quite nice to sort of get out of that space a little bit and think, yes, I can still add value to other types of organisations or in other types of content. So that's quite nice from a confidence point of view. Probably I've also learned a little bit about channeling my passion in the right way. And I think that's been tough for me. I've had quite a few people say, it's great that you're passionate, but you can be a bit, it's a bit too much. So working on kind of trying to get people to care and trying to get people to see why I care, but without kind of, being too confrontational or too kind of challenging about that, working with their context and their particular views, but trying to bring them along a journey rather than making the assumption that they would just agree that this is wrong and needs to be changed, which, is where I started probably slightly idealistically. Everybody must want the world to be more inclusive.
It's obvious.
Yeah, why isn't everyone doing this sort of thing? And now it's more, as we were talking about before, it's more around, okay, maybe that's not top of everybody's priority list, and my job is to kind of help them put that on their priority list and see how it can contribute to their other challenges. So, yeah, being passionate in the right way, I guess, is something I've learned.
Excellent. And what's the thing then that keeps you coming back every day to do this work that is hard, that involves exercising your passions?
I think it's that. I think, when I look at people, one of the things that gives me a lot of energy and a lot of commitment is working with people in sort of junior positions or people starting in management positions, and the kind of desire that I see from them to do the right thing by their staff and to manage in a good way and to be as inclusive as possible and to really take these issues seriously. I think that's really positive. And I think as an industry, we haven't always taken management skills as seriously as we perhaps should. Yeah. And I'm really, being part of that change is really energizing for me. But I think also thinking about the kind of workforce that I would want my nieces and nephews and, my friends' children to be entering 10 years from now, thinking about how I want that to be and how I want their experiences to be more positive than perhaps some of mine when I entered the workforce, where some things were accepted behaviours that now are not, and I think seeing that kind of social change and being part of that social change is really, really exciting, actually.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time, Nancy.
Oh, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. So thanks again to Nancy. We actually recorded this a few weeks ago, coincidentally, just after the release of the Panic report about representation and diversity in publishing, which made it kind of quite a timely conversation at the time, and it remains timely. I love the direction you were saying as well. Nancy was saying she does bottom up as well as top down. You've got to do both. Top down gives direction and permission to make changes, whereas bottom up is where the change actually happens, and that's really important. That there is an issue with ownership at the top because the world is very different from when, some people entered the world of work 20 or more years ago. But prioritising that is an important thing. And when it came for Nancy for setting up the business, I like the fact that, she took time out, she took an MBA to reflect on her own career. And you do need to find ways to do that. And for her, it was, taking two separate passions. And, that some of her friends have said, look, these two things are both things that you're passionate about. Maybe you need to combine those and to create something new. And what she's done, is to take that and build something that is hers out of these two separate things and to bring them together. I wish Nancy all the best with her endeavours with Business Inclusivity and Umbrella. that is it for this week. As usual, if you want to get a weekly update on the podcast and other news around the industry, you can sign up on the website myhat.wearefutureproofs.com. And of course, as always, if you want to give us a like or review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your music, that'll be great.
This was Talking Through My Hat, a podcast by John Pettigrew, founder of We Are Futureproofs. Please let me know your thoughts by leaving a review at Apple Podcasts or by commenting on the website, myhat.wearefutureproofs.com. You can subscribe to this channel at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Our theme music is from hooksounds.com.